It's nice to be here with all of you. So we'll sit. We'll do a kind of a formal practice for about 20 minutes or so. Then I'll kind of rap a little bit about a few things, hopefully some relevant to your experience, and then we'll have time to dialogue a little together about whatever you want to talk about: practice, life, your practice. Open time to talk. So let's do a little formal but not too formal sitting together. So, finding a relatively comfortable way to sit. And some of you may be old hands at meditating, and for others this may be relatively new. So I'll do a little guiding, and you're welcome to ignore what I'm saying and just do your own practice if you have one, or make use of some of what I'm saying. So sitting in a natural, comfortable way, letting your eyes can rest closed or be open, whatever's more comfortable for you. The eyes are open, letting the gaze be soft. And just beginning by bringing some awareness to your own experience right here and now. Just noticing what's happening in your own body as you're sitting here. Often we're so caught up in our minds or in where we're headed to or where we've just come from that we can forget that we're kind of living in a body. We have this home base for awareness. Letting yourself settle into being in a body, being in your body. Feeling, sensing your body from the inside. Feeling the contact of your feet on the floor, on your legs on the floor. And feeling the contact of your body in the chair or the cushion. And sensing contact with the hands, however they're positioned. Relaxing in the belly, letting the belly be soft. And softening the muscles of the chest and the back. Bringing awareness into your shoulders and letting your shoulders soften, letting your shoulders hang. And relaxing down your arms, your upper arms, your elbows, your forearms, wrists, hands, fingers and thumbs. And softening, letting go in the jaw, the muscles of the jaw, the face. Relaxing your eyes, the muscles around your eyes, the forehead, the sides of your head, the back of your head, the top of your head. So much of the time as we move through the day, our bodies kind of mobilized for action. The muscles in the face are tensed, making effort or trying to present something to other people, putting on some kind of face. For now, there's no need to put on any kind of face here. Just letting body be rest, letting the face be a rest. Natural. And this relaxing in the body allows a settling into being as you are, without having to be anything in particular, any way. Letting yourself be in that this being has awareness as part of its functioning. As you're sitting here, letting yourself be aware of the body as a whole, and noticing that even as you sit still, the body's not static. Living process unfolding in the body, and maybe the most tangible aspect of this is the process of breathing, which is something you can feel as you're sitting here. Just letting yourself feel the natural rise and fall of in-breathing and out-breathing. Feeling the breath wherever it's easiest to feel, in the chest, in the belly, in the back, at the nostrils. And breathing is something that's already happening. It's not something you need to do. Letting yourself be carried by the breath, riding the waves of breathing, in breath and out breath. As the mind wanders off at various points into thinking about this or that, about the future, about the past, about something in the present, just seeing if you can notice this happening. Just turn your attention towards what's happening in your mind, watching the images that are present in the mind, listening to the story, the analysis, the dialogue. And seeing if you can reconnect with the body and the breathing, even if it's just for half a breath. Even though other things are happening as you're sitting here, hearing sounds in the environment, probably having feelings in the body, mind states, emotions, moods arising, your thoughts coming and going. There's no need to block out or push away anything. Seeing if you can stay connected. Maybe keep a light awareness of breathing in the background. Just make room to attend to whatever happens to be arising in the present. You can be breathing with sensations in the body as they move and change, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant. Breathing with feelings in the body, emotions, feeling joyful, you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling sad, fearful. Breathing with mind states, you're feeling tired, restless. And knowing that anytime you feel lost or caught up, you can always come back more exclusively to the breathing, this feeling, and being with the simplicity of breathing in and breathing out. Resting with the breathing, relaxing with the breathing, hanging out with the breathing. Attending to the breathing in the body allows us to collect and unify our ordinarily scattered attention. To unify mind and body and dwell here in the present. Let ourselves be simple. And yet when there's some steadiness of awareness, this awareness can also include whatever else is happening in the body, in the mind, in the environment. A steady awareness with which we can meet the endless flow of experience that we call life. So for the last couple minutes of the sitting, just finding your own way between being more exclusively with the breathing when you need to collect and find some stability. And then just breathing with life in its myriad forms. Just watching the river flow, the river of your own moment-to-moment unfolding experience. nice to start with a little meditating. I think this first, as I was giving a lot of instructions during that sitting, just so I think it's very useful to hear the instructions again and again, because most of the time you're probably practicing on your own without them. So sometimes I err on the side of saying too much while you're meditating. But just this first part of practice, which is letting our often dispersed attention, right? We're attending to so many different things at once, holding so many things in our minds simultaneously. Yeah? And it can feel fairly scattered. Right? One can feel fairly scattered, diffuse. Does this resonate with anybody? You're doing a lot. Your law students or professors, so I imagine that this is the case. Spread thin. And that all has to do with where the mind is dwelling. It's dwelling in a lot of different places at once. Most of them are virtual places. Right? They're places that have to do with what you're thinking about. They're often things that are not here right now. So just this first aspect of meditating where we attend to the breathing, such a useful thing to cultivate. The capacity to be simple, to let all of that diffuse attention collect here in a way to bring the mind and the body together to inhabit the same space for like a few seconds. This is something that we could have gone our whole life to this point and like never heard about this. We sort of experience it randomly at various times when we happen to be very present. You're doing something you like, you're with somebody you really like, or you're in some environment that calls forth your whole presence. Sometimes it happens in a crisis. Whoa. But here we actually can cultivate a certain kind of presence in the here and now. Unification of attention. It's a very useful thing to cultivate. It also leads to a sense of stability and stillness internally. And this is just the first part of meditating, not necessarily the most interesting part. And so we go from being kind of like to a large degree, 95, 98% of the time living in our thoughts about things, and then occasionally visiting the present. Kind of like up here a lot, to at times residing here, even if it's for a second. And as we practice this again and again, noticing when we're in thinking and coming back to being here, as we practice this again and again, we develop some familiarity with actually being here in this way. From this stable base, we can then relate to the content of our own mind in a much more easeful and skillful way. It's not that your thoughts are bad or not useful. They can be extremely useful, some of them. Some of them are really not helpful. Some of that. I'm guessing, since you're all in the legal profession, you're probably very driven. You've gotten this far. Congratulations. But probably that drivenness has another side to it. Right? Probably hard on yourself. So some of those thoughts are useful, they get you to where you are, but sometimes they can also beat you down. Right? That kind of harshness, that inability to let yourself be, to relax, to be okay as you are, even if you're still going somewhere. So I think this, just having some basic practice is so great. You have this center here where you're kind of doing this as part of what you're doing in your school. I think that's a big deal. So just this first instruction, I think, is very useful. Then the other aspect, in the first instructions in meditation, you notice when you're thinking about something, right? And you're able to observe it. That also is an incredible power. Sometimes it seems like, I'm just thinking the whole time that I'm. Does anybody have this experience? You're sitting there. I'm saying stuff about the breathing, but like this thing is just going, right? And you might, in the beginning, think, "Oh, meditation is about learning how to turn it off." But you might notice I didn't say like stop thinking. Really, this capacity to notice when your mind is active and to be able to watch it is so useful. To be able to watch it without just being lost in it. This is a tremendous power, because then you can decide which thoughts are useful and which ones are like not to be believed. A lot of them are not to be believed. They're hypotheses based on very little evidence often. If you were to put them on trial and do a rigorous trial, they would not, they would be disproven. But we don't do that because they're sort of behind the scenes. And this is true of our most deeply held self-concept often. So I have so little time today, I can't go into that as deeply as would be useful. So to have a practice, I think, is very, very, it's a big deal. It just have some capacity to work with your own mind, to develop this inner stability, this inner steadiness with awareness, right? So the stability and the steadiness are one part, and then the awareness is another part. It's a really big deal. When we have awareness, we can see the way things are, not just externally, but also internally. We can start to get familiar with our own feelings and sensations. You notice as you're meditating, you said you have all kinds of feelings in the body, right? These are the things that run us around all day, trying to avoid feeling even a little discomfort. I'm not sure if you pay attention to the little discomforts that drive you to look at your phone. This is when you don't need to look at your phone and you look at your phone, notice what happened right before that. So it's like we're not practiced at being with our own feelings and sensations and learning how to attend to them without having to freak out and run away. That's a very useful capacity. And I imagine in your profession, you're going to have a lot of feelings and sensations come up. If you're working with human beings, which I imagine you will be. And if you're working with human beings who are suffering in one way or another, we have a couple options, right? One is we can just go into our mode, which is dealing with it by not feeling or damping down on what we feel, what's happening. Or we can learn how to be with what's happening inside of us so that we don't have to lose touch with the humans that we're interacting with, serving, but we can actually not only be with our own feelings, emotions, but other people's as well. This is a very, very useful and underdeveloped capacity, I think, in our society, maybe in all societies, I don't know. So this capacity for awareness, this kind of stable awareness, as the awareness gets more stable, it's like our capacity to be with feelings increases. Like the Three Little Pigs story. First you have a house of straw. Is it straw? Yeah. You have a house of straw. It doesn't take much big bad wolf blowing to blow over the house of straw. But as we practice, as we cultivate this present moment awareness, just by being aware again and again, just periodically, it's more like a house of sticks, more like a house of stone. It just gets more stable, not as rigid as a house of stone. So that's, all these metaphors are limited. But it increases our capacity to be with human experience. I'll just use that as shorthand. Without having to run away, and without having to shut down, without having to react, which are some modes that we get into. I did not, Charlie mentioned that I was teaching meditation in juvenile halls for years in New York City, and then also here at the Alameda County Juvenile Justice Center. And I would work here in San Leandro, I would work in the Max unit, and I went in every week for a couple of years, every Monday night, and we'd have a class. The whole unit, because it's too complicated to break up the unit, so like 30 guys. And people always want to know, like, well, what was the result? How'd it go? There was a big learning process on my end of how to be in that environment, how to meet the guys in there where they were. Yeah, so I learned a lot, which I'd love to talk about at some point, about how to share what I have while receiving what they have to share. But one thing I noticed in there was that as we entered the human territory together of not just meditating, but also sharing what we experience, there was a visible softening among nearly everybody. First, from a very defended place. I'm not going to show any vulnerability in this environment. That's an environment where you do not show vulnerability. Maybe the legal profession is like that too. Not here at Berkeley. Do not show any weakness. Even in the juvenile hall, it was like almost like a slogan. Kindness is weakness. Right? It's like, and don't trust anybody is the other slogan there. Anybody. So, but what I noticed is as people were able to feel themselves, as we're able to feel ourselves, it becomes a lot easier to feel others. Yeah? So I noticed a lot of empathy developing in the group, even across lines that you would not expect. It doesn't mean everybody was like best. What's that term? Besties? Everybody's not besties, but some sharing of humanness. That is very, very valuable. I think that's a result also of us softening into our own humanity, which happens inevitably when we let ourselves be here with ourselves, with some awareness. So another aspect of this kind of awareness practice, which I think is really important, maybe in all work, I don't know if it's especially important in your work, but maybe it's in all work, is it allows us to stay in touch with what is actually important to us from moment to moment. It can be very hard in environments where there's all kinds of different pressures to stay connected to our own, in a way, our own values. I don't even, maybe in the Q&A this can come up a little bit. I don't know what kind of pressures you're under, or what people are telling you you're supposed to do or should do, or what it means to be successful in your field. But this is both a benefit and a downside of awareness. The downside is it's harder to get away from what's true. That's also the benefit. But it's the downside too, because then some things then are harder for us to continue with. I think that's a good thing, but it can feel like bad news. Like, oh, before I had this awareness, I didn't realize there was a gap between me and what I'm doing. And now I'm aware of it. And then we have to suffer through that a little bit. I think that's good in the long run. Better to happen now than later, right? So that's also part of why I have faith in these kinds of practices in terms of just the benefit not only to ourselves but to society. And I think that's when we're in touch with what is really important to us, that's reflected in our actions. I should also say, I feel that I should touch on some different dimensions of it. Also, I was speaking to Charlie and Dan earlier, and just hearing about how much pressure there is in law school, so maybe I should say a few things about it. I think Dan said something about, like, let's talk about drinking from a fire hose. Is that? That does not sound fun. Even if you're thirsty, it's not too much of a good thing. So one of the things I think about a formal meditative practice that's so useful about it is you have some time in your day where you're not taking in. You're not taking in media. You're not taking in your law stuff. It's a technical term. That's what they call it, right? Your law stuff. You're not taking, and it's kind of like it gives them. You're also not, in your busy stuff. It allows things to percolate. Sometimes there's just no digesting time. So even if you're sitting in your daily meditation, you feel like, I'm just thinking the whole time or remembering stuff I have to do. I think that's actually a very useful time. It's a certain kind of fallow time where things can process internally. So that you can even get to the place where there's some capacity to be present. So to have some time each day, even if it's 5 minutes, where you make a space to do nothing in a formal way, I think that's extremely valuable. It also, it kind of gets something into awareness on a kind of an unconscious level, which is, it starts to register on some degree to your being that, wow, I can sit here for these 5 minutes. I can sit here with whatever's happening. Sometimes we don't really realize that. All the things that I think are so, I cannot cope with, are mostly feelings and thoughts and emotions. Okay? Things that I'm experiencing in here. They may be sort of triggered by what's happening out there, but they're happening here. So to sit every day, like for these 5 minutes at this time of day, I will sit with whatever's happening, even if it doesn't feel like much is happening. It's a very powerful message it sends to your unconscious. I can do that. This is a capacity I have. And I think this allows, it's just the beginning, it's not the whole picture, but it allows for us to kind of bring this capacity into our lives if we do it consciously. Oh, I can be here with what is here. That's a practice, it's a training, not like you should be able to be with everything, but I think this is, in a way, the practice expands in I could do different spatial metaphors. Concentric circles expands out. Yeah? Our capacity to be and to be with in a balanced, open, heartful way. And as one of my teachers in Burma used to say, somebody asked him once, and this is their framework around enlightenment and stuff. So he says, why does enlightenment or awakening or whatever you want to call that, tend to happen for people in phases? Why does it not happen all at once? And he said, because you wouldn't be able to tolerate the pain or the joy. And I like that, because usually we expect from, enlightenment, whatever that is some it's just the joy part. Yeah. But I think the direction of practice is we expand in both directions. Our capacity to be with being alive, joy, love, connectedness, excitement, pleasure, even, in a balanced way. And also in the other direction, all of the various pain, suffering, and all of its forms. Expand in both directions. And that's, I think, why this is so useful. And it's not just like a nice break or like a little daily trip to the spa. I'm not anti-spa. I think it's a different thing. Those are a few rambling thoughts for you about meditation. But I want to stop here so that we can dialogue a little bit, because I'm, in a way, I'm more interested in what you want to talk about. I don't know you, most of you. Tyrion, I've known for forever. It's awesome to see you. Yeah.
I would just like to say I'm a local attorney with an interest in mindfulness and law. I graduated law school 25 years ago. And it's amazing that this is taking place here. And for the students, hopefully you appreciate how fortunate you are. Because 25 years ago at Boston University, where I was never this relaxed in law school. But this just didn't exist as an option, and it makes me, and obviously your dad's been instrumental in, your kind of carrying forward, and what you've done here, kind of, seeing things about it. But I hope that you all keep it up. I think it will benefit you all as you move forward in your careers, but also in terms of the profession, it's a kernel of hope for the profession, because it's been, I mean, this is great that this is happening. That's all I really want to say. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. And before you said Boston University, I recognized the accent. Don't be shy. You must have questions. This stuff is not straightforward. As much as when I talk about it, it seems like, oh, it's so simple, just be aware. Doesn't it feel complicated when you have your eyes closed and you're sitting there? Is it like that for anybody? Yeah. Is it just me? Yeah.
Well, I was amazed to hear you say that when you sit and your mind just automatically turns to your list or whatever. That's what happens to me often when I first start to sit. And I feel like I need to just spend a little time doing that before I'm afraid to do it. So this is the first I've heard that practice
endorsing your. Well, let me put a caveat. I'm not endorsing that meditation is a time to do your to-do list. But sometimes I think the great thing about awareness, like you're noticing, is it allows you to be aware of what is useful. Right? So when you're aware, you realize, hey, if I just do 5 minutes of to-do list before I sit, some part of me gets to relax. Yeah? So I think that's very skillful. I guess I was speaking more to, I notice sometimes if I'm sitting, things will pop up that I just have not thought about, and I forgot to remember for weeks. Yeah? And I really feel like that's the first time that there's been room for some of these things to kind of bubble up. And I think it's no coincidence that people walk around feeling disconnected from themselves or feeling like life feels truncated or not full. And a lot of times that lack of fullness is that we haven't made any space to let our own fullness be here. So we're kind of so busy and just managing that a lot of things get pushed to the side. And it turns out that a lot of those things are what we are. So as we can incorporate it, I think it allows for a richness, a kind of experiential felt richness. It's just the richness of being in touch with dimensions of your own being. Yeah.
I was thinking about, or wanted to hear a little bit more about your experience connected to the work in juvenile hall, but also, so for some of us doing social justice work, or we have a juvenile justice practice in the clinic, there's the thinking of mindfulness practice in relation to the service of care providers, and talking or teaching about that. And then there's, which often, at least so far in my thinking, hasn't been also translated to the people, for whom, the communities and the people, translating that to the communities and the people for whom we are working, and we're working from. And so I was thinking that you do both. You work with, you help the helpers, your counseling or mindfulness practice, but you've also done kind of the direct work, practice. And so it's a bit of an ambiguous question, but kind of just thinking or talking a little bit about how those are different or how those are built.
Yeah, I feel like what you're raising is really important because they're both important.
Yeah.
And there are people doing both, but I think that the more, it's like, sometimes I think about it as, like on a systems level, we need it to be more complete and more supportive. That was one thing that was a downside about the juvenile thing is then they get out, and it's like, okay, I think that's a great vision for for how things could be, is to have the people coming into the prisons, teaching the inmates. You have the staff in the prison. I mean, this is like the ideal, the staff in the prison. And we used to have that. It was very interesting. Because this stuff is relevant to human experience, the staff, some of the staff would really participate and really participate in a way that, you're not really supposed to. But you can see it's like, oh, and this is really important. And then also to have stuff in the community. So, that would be a healthy, mindful ecosystem. And I think, we just need to keep thinking on those levels. That's really important. I don't have any answers. Yeah, thanks. You're doing. You're doing.
Can you speak briefly when we were sitting and there was all that noise outside? Can you speak maybe to the beginner sitter about how to sit successfully with outside distractions?
What noise are you talking about? Nobody else knows that. Yeah. So I would just shift. Two words that I would identify in that, is success and then distraction. So that's really the way it feels when we're beginning. It's like there's the breathing, and that's my goal, and then there's the stuff getting in the way, right? And actually, life feels like that a lot of times. There's my goal, and there's all the stuff getting in the way. Sometimes the stuff getting away is me, and that makes it complicated, or comes from me, but it's still the same kind of thing. So this is a great point, and it comes up for everybody in practice. So the idea, we just use the breathing. It's, in a way, arbitrary. It's just something that's always happening, so we can attend to it and come back to it. It gives us like a reference point from which we can notice when we go off into our mind. It's hard to notice that because we're always off in our mind. So you say to people, we live in distraction of T.S. Eliot's distracted from distraction by distraction. But we don't even know it. So this is sometimes when we start meditating, it's like, whoa, that's what's happening in here. So we have this reference point to the breathing, but it's the awareness we're cultivating, not the breathing. So when you're breathing, and then there are sounds in the environment, usually it's like one or the other. So what you can play with is what it's like to keep a light awareness with the breathing and just let everything else happen in the background. So you're kind of like, rather than going like, you're kind of going like this. And then what we can realize is, there can be stability even with this input. Yeah? And actually where the dissonance arises is in the struggle with what's happening. And this is true for everything. Where we get jostled is because we don't know how to be in relationship to what's arising in an open way. Yeah. So there's sound, and you can just attend to the sound. It's just like the breathing. Then maybe it's unpleasant sound, so there's a feeling in the body like, oh. So just to be with that feeling. Oh. And then you have a thought about it. Why couldn't they put the construction, don't they respect what we're doing? How come they couldn't, whatever. Why did they get this room? They should have known. So it goes into thinking, they can be aware of that. Thinking, and then come back. So there is no such thing as a distraction. It's just another thing to include in awareness. That's what the practice part is. Yeah. And of course in the beginning it's like driving, right? When you're trying to learn how to drive, it's so complicated. There's so many different things happening at once. I can't be aware of shifting and the gas pedal and the clutch and then like looking at where I'm going at the same time. But as we get practiced at it, it's like second nature. Not only are we driving on the highway, weaving in and out of traffic, but we're talking on the phone, and we're eating a sandwich, and we're shaving. Sometimes I commute across the road, and you see all kinds of really cool stuff. Hard to believe. People can pull off while they're driving. But I think that's that way with awareness. We start really simply. It's hard enough just to be with the breathing for like a couple seconds. But then we practice including, and sounds, and then sensations, and feelings. And at some point the awareness is stay, and it's sort of like we can be in the flow of experience with awareness. So it's and then another thing embedded in your question, which is really important, is what we're really cultivating in the practice is it's the how of how we're in relationship to what's happening. That's a very important dimension of experience we often neglect. Usually we think what matters is what is happening. how do I change what's happening to make it what I want to be happening? How do I get rid of what's happening and get something else, right? But in this practice, what we're practicing, how do I meet what is happening, whatever it is, with presence, balance, and awareness? When we do that, then we're in a much better position in our active lives to respond effectively in the moment, with all of our resources, bringing our resources to bear, and appropriate to what's actually happening. We can actually see. So sometimes people have this question about meditation. They say, like, oh, it seems kind of passive, you know? Like, well, there's all these things to be done in the world. Why would I, like, sit and contemplate my navel, you know? But really, I think what we're learning is, it's like we're learning this thing that we have never been taught before, which is how to actually be with what's happening. It doesn't mean that that's where it ends. It's not like, now I know how to be with things as they are. You're suffering, fine. No, then we can, but it's that first step that's important. And you know this just from when you're having a hard time. If somebody sits with you and they can be with you without trying to fix you, without telling you what you're supposed to do, for like 5 minutes, doesn't that make a difference? Then you might be open to them, to their input or not. You know? But it's like that first part is like undercultivated. Or the first part of just seeing what the problem is and letting ourselves take it in, the enormity sometimes of it, without having to defend against it. Then we can actually enter into a potential solution. And I think a lot of times we just act. We react because we can't tolerate what we feel by being in contact with another human being situation. You know, and probably if you're working with people who are in suffering, you realize, and if you're aware, it's like, wow, it's really hard to be in sustained contact with this degree of pain. And it's very important to be in real contact with it before you move into solving it or deciding what needs to happen. We have time for like half the question. Yeah.
What if members of Congress, people in hospital chaplaincy programs, members of rank and tenure committees, all encouraged to meditate?
What if?
What if?
There are members of Congress meditating.
Not enough.
Not enough, yeah. Yeah. I think that's... yeah. I mean, yeah, that would be great. You know, I don't think that it's like meditation is not like a panacea. It doesn't solve everything, you know. But I think it's a really good element to have, you know, sort of like awareness does not, it certainly doesn't hurt. Yeah, and I think what you're speaking to is, yeah, if people cultivated some degree of presence and balance of mind and some capacity for compassion, that would be of huge benefit. And that's what you're all doing, anyway, which is very encouraging. To me, when I came, I thought, are people really going to come to hear this? But it's, you know, I've heard that you have a really robust program there. I think it's very exciting, and I think that the great thing about cultivating awareness and all this stuff is it's not that it makes you into some kind of meditation person. It's that it makes you into you. It lets you be you and do what you're going to do, but support you in that, you know, and deepening. So we're going to have to stop in a moment. But thank you for having me here, inviting me here, and I hope some part of this has been useful in some way. And I wish you well in everything that you're doing and yet to do.
Thanks. Thank you, John. It was Will. My old friend was his father. My new friend is Will.
That's okay. People sometimes come up to me and say, I love the book he wrote. My program, I said, yeah, I founded that clinic when I was 3. 5, actually.
Yeah. It's great. I love that there are a certain number of mannerisms that his father has and he has, and I just smile every time he comes up with one of those. Anyway, thanks so much for being with us. I hope you'll come around more often.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone, for your time and attention.
And then I was like, it's Will! So I was just like, oh, that's how's the family? And I see the weird thing, and Johnny and
What does that mean to you? And I'm not exactly sure how he was doing it, but I think when he's talking about level of attainment, if you will. But I think having this total awareness, the good and the bad, and being fully present, fully awake, kind of like what I was having. It's like, it's actually kind of crazy. I don't remember this recently, but it's like a map. It's called like the, technically it's like a map or that, but it's literally, you can map based on the sensations and awareness that you have. At any given moment in your meditation, that like very trained teacher can tell you where you are. So, I don't know. I think it's actually can be distracting. In the West, people don't really teach it too much because so it's like, where am I on the map? But I think it's interesting that it's out there. So it's kind of it's a good question. Thank you. Yeah, I feel
I didn't know
Okay, that was really helpful. So you think that that's not an abnormal?
Professors from other law schools looking into this. Professors are deans for 30 law schools. And this and next year.
Yeah, those could go by.
They were in a small
And then we're all
not hyper-violent.
I have those forms. I don't know if you want, but if you want me to, because there's a couple parts we can fill out for you. You have like 2 minutes.
Yeah. One of the things we're planning, I don't know, think about
I want to show you.
I know, especially so you're doing therapy counseling.
Yeah.
I know you're doing a lot.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably. Oh my God! Seriously, this is so great. So anyway,
Actually, having this on my phone is sort of like
he's a grown-up with a guitar. So does he have a guitar because he knows to be a rock star? He's enough like that. He's teenage, are you guys going to go to the poll at all?
I've been sending my kids for basically 2 months. You know my parents, they're really, really difficult. They're packing up this month and next month, or they sold the other half of that to my dad and their industry.
So yes,
and we're gonna build a nice wing. Very nice. Seriously. Wow. I was like, wow, this is, I love this property. It's wacky. So, and I'm gonna go on sabbatical for 4 months.
this summer.
Starting the summer with vacation. And actually with Angela Harris, who's up at
Thank you, Charlie. Yeah, I do want to show up. Sure. Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. We should talk sometime. Have lunch. Yeah.
It was so nice to have Diane for all everyone said. But I was like, I desperately.
Oh, that's great.
I really appreciate it.
I'm glad.
Yeah, exactly. I know, it's so good. Was it good? All right, good. I like that. Expand the risk capacity for suffering and for joy. That was really like
Yes, that's right.